Story 1. English class. Not so kind word teacher. First period. On a day I'm already barely holding life together and have already cried twice. For some context, I am normally a very proactive sharer. At the top of my class, I believe in all working together and sharing to learn more. Furthermore, I did not have a great childhood at all. Lots of unpleasant situations have happened which I really don't want to go into. I digress. Our new assignment is to create a Where I'm From poem, the original by George L. Lyon. Go ahead, look it up. As a brainstorming activity for this assignment, we were going around the room multiple times talking about happy things that we remember and want to write about in our poems. When the teacher would get to me, I said I didn't want to share, and that was respected for 3 rounds. Unfortunately, I wasn't going to get away with this uncomfortable avoidance, and finally, my teacher was insistent that I share. Despite many protests, I was told I must share, and seeing as my morning has been difficult, I wasn't in the mood to make things up. Yeah, I could probably write about the unpleasant daycare for things I used to look forward to. Oh, and for phrases our parents repeated a lot. I could probably talk about all the arguing and throwing things and disrespectful language that was tossed around. And all of my memories from recess. I'm sure it would be great to talk about how I used to go cry with a coloring book behind the big oak tree on the far side of the playground in elementary school. The entire class went silent, not a word. And that's when I knew I won. My teacher's response was, "Well, I think now's a good time for a mask break." I have since been told I could have an alternate assignment if I wanted, but I've declined as I think this might be a good therapeutic activity, and making her uncomfortable is an added bonus. Clarifications: my parents were not abusive to me, but rather, I have gone through several divorces on both sides, so there was a significant amount of grown-up disagreements. I did share the unpleasant parts of my childhood willingly. Yes, I could have made something up, but frankly, I'm not one to give in when I see wrongdoing. I have accepted my past and learned to grow from it, and I know that there are other people like me who have not. It's for them that I did this. To some of the critics, I am not one who makes this my lifestyle. I am not someone who has let this take control of my life. I've had my downs, but I've also had my ups, and that's where I'm going. I'm grateful for the tough times, but at the same time, we all have those sensitive days, and even the best of us can barely hold it together sometimes. Story 2. Apologies if the English isn't perfect. It's not my native tongue. Nearly 2 years ago, I started work at company as their digital marketing person. After I started, it turned out that I was brought in to address the issues left by my predecessor, the VP of marketing, who had a team of 4 plus himself, spent over $1 million in 1 year, and brought in 5 deals, 2 of them for under $10,000. As you can well imagine, after a performance like that, I had lots of work to do and very little to do it with. Aside from 1 or 2 paid tools, everything else was to be done using free tools only. I'm gonna do some bragging here. I beat the previous year's figures in all categories with 10% of the budget. When I started, I thought the founder EO had a really good management style, saying things like, "Your successes are yours, your mistakes are mine," and "the enemy of good is great." I don't expect perfection. I want you to make sure things work and get them done. In essence, I was allowed to run my own one-man department and outsourced freelancers, and as long as I was getting results, he left me alone. Since I was the only person on the marketing team, I also had to learn a large number of skills and platforms that weren't directly related to digital marketing. Not to say everything was perfect, but things were pretty good. One of the main things that weren't perfect was that the founder CEO had serious anger management issues. As I said before, he left me alone, but I saw him blow up and fire other people for silly reasons. He lost his temper at me too once or twice, but he'd calm down after a couple of hours, and things would be back to normal. If it looks like an abusive relationship, that's because looking back, that's exactly what it was. As the year came to an end, I approached the founder and initiated a performance review. I ran him through everything I had done in the past year, and he was pretty surprised at how much I had done with so little. I asked him for a raise, pointing out that I was currently making $8,000 per month in the local currency. Average is $4,500 per month, when people with my now augmented skill set were making between $13,000 and $14,000 per month. I asked him for $12,000. He said he'd get back to me and never did. Every time I asked him about my raise, he had another excuse. After the last excuse, I began looking for something else. The other day, we had a meeting, and it turns out that 2 months ago, I made a mistake. It wasn't a critical mistake, and it was rectified within a few hours of discovering the mistake. No harm or damage was caused whatsoever to the company, but the founder CEO completely lost his temper. I mean, slamming on tables, yelling for the whole office to hear, what have you. Then he said the magic words, "Pack your things up and go home. Think about whether you want to keep working here." So that's what I did, and 10 seconds later, I said, "No, I don't." I started packing my stuff up while he turned an even deeper shade of red and got even louder. I didn't answer him at all, just kept on packing up my things and saying goodbye to my colleagues. It turns out that being ignored really pushed his buttons, to the point where he started threatening to call security to have me removed, while I was actively removing myself and my things from the office. Here's the part where it gets beautiful. My country is very strict on employees' rights. Sorry, Americans, I feel your pain. His words and behavior are considered an improper dismissal. By law, he's required to give me 30 days notice of dismissal, which he didn't. When he realized his mistake, he convened a pre-dismissal hearing, but it was already too late. He opened himself up to a lawsuit, which I'm already talking with lawyers about. Because by law, he has to give me those 30 days notice, even though he already fired me. For the next 30 days, I'm eligible for all the benefits and social rights in my salary, but I can do literally nothing for him. And there's nothing he can do to me without making the incoming lawsuit 10 times worse. I've already got 4 interviews lined up for next week, paying almost double what the founder was paying me, and best of all, I'll be interviewing for other places on his dime. The cherry on top is that because I'm the only marketing person, without me, nothing happens in the marketing department for the next month. And if he doesn't hire someone in time, I won't be around to answer any questions the new person might have. Story 3. I used to work at a gas station in a pretty culturally diverse area, but overall, it was basically the border between a very rural area and a suburban area in Florida. The suburban area was more culturally diverse with the different businesses around and access to the highway. The rural area was what you would call redneck country, and anyone who lived there would tell you the same. I'm Filipina, and those features kind of show. I have high cheekbones, dark hair, dark eyes, and somewhat tan skin. I'm more light-skinned because my mother is white, so it throws some people off. But I'm almost never identified as Filipina because I speak Spanish. In that particular area, we had a lot of Spanish customers, so some would overhear me speak to them in Spanish, and either look surprised that I knew how to speak it or, more commonly, mistaken me for being Hispanic. One morning, at around 4:30 o'clock, a Hispanic regular came in and got his usual coffee, water bottle, and a pastry of some kind that we sold. We'd usually talk while he made his coffee because we'd just opened up, and it was quiet around that time. He was on his way out to head to work when another, easily 6-foot middle-aged, white gentleman swung open the door with a very annoyed expression. I was caught off guard not only because he swung open the door aggressively, but because there was no other car in the parking lot or at any pumps, so I had no idea where he came from. My regular customer says goodbye, so I naturally responded with, "Have a nice day." I think my mistake was that I looked at my new customer before I was done speaking to the previous one, and this made him very angry. He started yelling at me, saying I was being racist and that I was racially profiling him. What he meant by that, I still don't know. I apologized and tried to explain that I was talking to the other man walking out of the door, but he cut me off and told me to speak to him in his native white language, putting a heavy emphasis on white when he said it. I then began to say random phrases I could remember in various languages like French, German, Italian, and threw a little Polish in there, and he went off. "Stop! I can't understand what you're saying, you stupid border rat trash." Honestly, that was a new one for me, but I stopped as requested. I looked at him with the biggest smile on my face and told him, "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know which white language you wanted me to use, so I was trying all of them to see which one it was." He started calling me racist again, claiming he was going to call corporate on me for racially discriminating against him and not giving him service. I told him that I didn't know what he wanted me to do for him yet, because he was too busy racially profiling me and using disrespectful language at me for me to ask him. He smiled smugly and said that nobody would believe my illegal version of events anyway. I politely pointed to the cameras around the store and told him that I had 8 different angles of him saying all of that to me. His smile vanished. He told me to leave and stormed out. Honestly, to this day, I have no idea where he came from or what he needed from the store. But that experience hasn't and probably won't ever leave me. Sir, wherever you are now, I hope you're a little more cultured and, at the very least, understand that not all white people speak English. Story 4. This happened about 5 years ago, and I haven't been to the Home Depot in question in a long time. Names have been changed for privacy. In high school, I was working at the local Home Depot as a head cashier. I kept track of all the active registers and made sure things ran smoothly. I held this position for quite some time, about 1 to 2 years, and enjoyed it pretty well. Customers were nice, and my coworkers were mostly craftsmen and gardeners, all with interesting stories to share. Before we go further, let me explain something. I am allergic to nearly every form of pollen. Every form. I take allergy medication, but even then, if I am in close proximity to flowers for too long, like more than 30 minutes, I will begin to break out in hives and vomit most of the time. So, after about 3 months working in the winter, the spring season was upon us. The worst season for my allergies. One day, about 3 of our garden section cashiers called off sick. They are pretty reliable people, so I had no problem finding people to cover for them. As I come to my manager to inform them of the position changes, my manager looks at me and says, "You can handle the garden section on your own, can't you?" I inform my manager that I could cover it for at most 15 minutes before my allergies flare up and I'll have to leave. He states, "We don't have any documents on file that state you are not fit to work in the garden section, so unless you come to me with a doctor's note stating your allergies, I couldn't care less." I don't know what got him upset that morning, but I complied, saying, "I want to be sure of what you are asking. You want me to work in a section which is hazardous to my health instead of placing equally capable employees in that section." Did I stutter, he said. "Okay, sure," I said. I make my way down to the garden section, and immediately my eyes are stinging. I decide that I am going to stick it out for my boss's sake, no matter how poor my service becomes. The first 10 minutes are pretty uneventful, but then a customer asks me about the rash on my arms. "The Home Depot does not care about allergies," I say, as I do not have official paperwork. This customer looks extremely concerned, asking for my manager's name. At this point, I was feeling nausea hit me. I threw up in the trash can at the register, turned back to smile as well as I could and say, "I work under Bob." The customer reassures me that I will be okay and tells me I should head home. Turns out, this guy, Nick, was a higher up at the Home Depot's regional management and was my boss's boss. So, naturally, I comply with the chain of command and head to the locker room to pack up. As I am packing, Bob comes in, fuming and expressing frustration, telling me I have no right to leave yet and that my shift is not over for another 5 hours. I simply say, "Nick told me to go home." Bob's face turns red as he threatens to fire me, saying I was lying and tells me to go back out. I comply, knowing that I will see Nick on my way out. I pass Nick, still in the orange apron, and he asks me where I am going. I say that Bob told me to go back to work. Nick's expression goes from concerned to furious as he takes my apron from me and tells me I'll be paid for the full shift and to go home. I come into work the next day to see that Bob's nameplate has been removed from the office. I asked our HR representative what happened, and apparently, after I had left, Nick stormed Bob's office and proceeded to perform an audit on all of his past employee complaints. This manager had been dismissing complaints for the past 5 years. Needless to say, there was an opening for the store management position, and I was given a week's vacation for my troubles. My satisfaction was significant.